Hello everyone, my name is Leah Werkheiser, and for the requirements for Read 5308, I compiled a plan for a future action research about the most effective journaling method. I began to think of this action research method because last year my district went to Gretchen Burnaby style journaling. As a requirement, every single teacher had to journal for around 10 minutes every single day or every other day, and so of course I began to do it. Once I began to feel comfortable with the journaling method, I started playing around with how to create the most writing from my students. The district told us to use heart maps, but as I began using it, I found that my students really weren't finding prompts that they wanted to write about. So they'd sit there for several minutes. So I decided, well, how about I give them an optional prompt every single day, but they don't have to write about it. They could choose stuff from their heart map instead. So with the action research, I decided, well, I've never actually researched which one is creating the most writing and growing their writing abilities the most. So it created my research question, which is, which method creates the most growth during independent writing time? The method that allows students to choose their own prompts with no help? The method where I give choice prompts but still allow them the option to write their own ideas? Or when they are guided by a heart map to choose prompts? Now that I had my research question, I began to look at the experts who have conducted research on the most effective writing strategies, and I came up with 3 most important things. Whenever we have students write, the most important thing is that it's authentic, that it's happening daily, and that they do receive some guidance. With regards to authentic writing, the experts found that in order for it to be authentic, it needs to be interest-driven, it needs to be with the idea that it's being written for an audience, and it also needs to have variety and realistic writing. Now, what makes it interest-driven is the students need to care about what they're writing. It needs to be things that are important, that are real life, and that have not been written about again and again and again. If they've written about the same prompt 20 times throughout their elementary and middle school career, then it's no longer going to be of interest to them. If they don't have enough information about what they'd like to write about, it needs to be that they can research it, that they can go into a computer and find out information and add that to whatever they're writing. Now, for writing to an audience, it doesn't have to be shared, but students need the feeling of being heard. They need it to be important. And if there's no audience, a lot of the times that gets lost. With regards to genre variety and realistic writing, what's happened with writing in the recent years because of the high-stakes tests, not a lot of teachers are teaching genre variety. Since STAR only has the expository prompt now, teachers have gone out of their way to teach only that because that's the only thing that's going to quote-unquote count for their data. But we all know that that's not really real. They're not only ever going to write just an expository prompt. Now that is important, but they also need to be introduced to creative writing. They need to be introduced to narrative. They need to be introduced to poetry. Therefore, in order to be authentic, it needs to be interest-driven and to an audience and have variety so that they feel that it's real. From my literature review, I also found that writing needs to happen daily. Reading tends to get more of the focus because it's tested every year since 3rd grade, and writing is only tested once in elementary and once in middle school and then high school. So it tends to be on the back burner for a lot of teachers, and so whenever they have students write, it's kind of an afterthought. It's a short paragraph that really doesn't grow their writing abilities because it's so surface level. So daily doesn't just mean a tiny little paragraph or 1 or 2 sentences. It means they daily need to delve into the action of writing. I also found that students need guidance. Now, for guidance, you can follow 3 methods. There's the conference method, process strategies, and mentor texts. I found that all 3 are important, but very different. For conferences, That is a time where a teacher or another student can meet with a student to help delve into the writing of a student and try to figure out, here's how you can improve it. Hey, what are your concerns? Here are some really great strengths you have. And within those conferences, teachers can really get into an independent lesson that's geared toward the struggles of that student. They also need process strategies. Now, in one of the studies, it found that process strategies weren't the most important thing, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but process strategies are where students need to know, here you're going to draft, and then let's revise, and let's edit, and here's how you can process the writing so that you get a really good essay. But one of the studies found that process strategies aren't the most important thing if the student doesn't know the end goal. The students need to see, here's what I'm working towards. So even if you give them process strategies, kind of a litmus test of do this and this and this, it doesn't actually meet their needs unless they have something to model it towards, which brings us to our last point, which is mentor texts. Students need to see good writing. All of the best authors have some sort of person who has formed them or shaped them as a writer. And expert authors and illustrators found that they needed to see a mentor text so that they could get some of their ideas, so that they could form together from one author and another author together to create the best text. Now, having compiled all of these research studies, I found that journal writing really is a sound method because it is authentic, as students do have choice and they can research if they would like to, and they can share. And it happens every single day, and during the writing time I have conferences and we can use mentor texts. So now that that issue was solved, I needed to decide which method was going to be the most beneficial, either giving them a heart map as their guidance or giving them an optional prompt. So for my study, I decided to complete it at Rand Middle School, which of course is a pseudonym. It's a school in Dallas with a student population of 607, all of which are divided amongst several different races. Now, I decided to use my own classroom, which is an English as a Second Language class with 60 students, 57 of which speak Spanish as their first language. 21 of them are in special ed as well. For the study, I decided to use one of the classes as a control group, and that class wouldn't receive any intervention, so I wouldn't be giving them a heart map or an optional prompt. Class B would receive an optional prompt every single day, which means they can choose to write about it, or if they have something else on their mind, something else they're passionate about, then that is absolutely an option. Here's an example of the heart map. Obviously, we'll start off with the blank one, and together we'll create all the things that are important to us. And for this action research study, I would use 4 sources of data. The first one is I would have the students complete a Likert scale in Google Forms before and after the intervention, just to see their own opinions about the intervention. The next one would be classroom observations. I would take a seating chart and tally how often are the students writing. Are they off task? Are they struggling with that, with the method that I've given them? The next data will be observed from before and after the intervention. I'll have the students write to a star-style prompt before I've given it to them, and that's to a specific prompt. And then after, again, to a specific prompt, and see which class had the most gain. And then the last part is actually before any of the intervention starts. I need to see if these classes are actually comparable for it to be a realistic study. If Class A all did really well in their writing checkpoint, which they complete in their language arts classes, if they all do really well, but in Class B they all do terribly, then they're not realistic to compare together. Here's the rubric that I'll use to grade their writing before and after the intervention. Here's the Likert scale that I'll put in a Google form to see really how they view writing and if the writing prompt or the heart map actually changes that. And last but not least, here is my seating chart where I'll tally. I will only tally if they're off task or not writing for a minute because it's 10% of the time. Sometimes students just need time to process and form, so I will only be processing that really for fluency and only put a tally if it's over a minute. Here's my timeline for the intervention. Before I start the intervention, I'm going to collect the data, which will include the Likert scale, the pre-test, and the writing checkpoint so I can see if all the classes actually match. Then in the week 1, I'll begin the intervention, where Class A will be the control group, Class B and C will receive the heart map and the optional writing prompts. In weeks 2 through 8, I'll continue the intervention, just continue collecting data on fluency, how often they're writing. And then in week 9, I'll conduct the Likert scale again to see if their opinions on writing have changed. I'll conduct the post-test where I'll give them another STAR-style prompt and see if there was gains made more in one class than the other. For the data analysis, first of all, I'm going to depend on triangulation. If I see different things in their writing from my observations than their Likert scale or from their rubric, then the data isn't really sound. I will look at the pre-test and post-test rubric to compare which class has grown the most. I'll use the Likert scale as well, and then I'm going to compare their fluency from my classroom observations. Now, the limitation that I found is in the literature review, I found that when they said daily writing, they needed it to be in depth and at length, and I can only really do 10 minutes because I only see the students 50 minutes a day. So the writing time is limited, and that doesn't really lend itself well to a STAR-style prompt. Now, what I believe that I'm going to see whenever I do conduct this study is I can expect to have a few potential outcomes. First of all, I might just find that heart mapping and optional prompts are equally effective. As long as students are receiving some sort of guidance to help create their authentic ideas, then it's helpful. I also might find that either heart mapping or optional prompts will be more effective than the other one. And then I might find that the control group will be the most effective, which really I don't believe is very likely. The last potential outcome that I could see is that no method has shown any growth over the other, which would be very astonishing to me, as I think them receiving guidance will be more helpful than nothing. The implications of this study are that, first of all, I need to share the information that I have with my fellow staff in the district. Now, if I find that really the heart map isn't beneficial, then I need to talk to the district, because since it's a district mandate to use that method. Also, the optional prompts, if it does prove to be more effective, then they need to know that. My fellow staff as well. I have another ESL teacher who uses the optional prompts because that's what I've directed her to do. She would benefit from this study as well. The next implication is that if this were to be completed on a large scale, then the district needs to provide certain resources. First of all, a professional library needs to be had, and I know most districts have it, including my own, but in order for this action research to happen, that has to be in place. Also, a subscription to peer-reviewed articles. In order for me to kind of guide my action research, I needed to see what research was saying, and I was able to use that because I had the peer-reviewed articles. They also need financial support. For this to be on a large scale, there needs to be money. Obviously, money to provide the professional library, money to provide the subscription, and the last thing is a timeline. Teachers need some guidance. There needs to be some sort of idea that an action research needs to be completed by this point. Which leads me to my conclusion that action research plans are truly beneficial to everyone who conducts them. Now, because of my study, what I'd like to consider next is if heart maps is the most beneficial, which method of creating a heart map is the most beneficial over time or just one and done. If it was optional prompts, do I need to vary them by unit? Do I need to have a random one every single day? Do they need to combine? And then the last one would be, well, do I need to have writing 2 days a week for 30 minutes or every day for only 10? Which one would be more beneficial because of the daily issue? And then what's so important is that we collaborate. I need to collaborate with my district, and I need to collaborate with my team. Thank you very much.